The marble silence of a $50 million penthouse breaks with a single question. Daddy, do you even like being with us? The words don't come from a rival, a lawyer, or a boardroom enemy. They come from a 7-year-old child staring at a man who built an empire worth hundreds of millions. For a moment, the millionaire CEO freezes. The buzzing phone in his hand suddenly feels heavier than his entire fortune. What happened before this moment? And what choice could drive a woman to walk away from wealth most people only dream of? To protect the love money could never buy? Stay with me, because this is a story you will not forget. And before we begin, make sure you subscribe to our channel so you don't miss the next powerful story, and share in the comments where in the world you're watching from. Now let's step into the truth behind the empire. The marble floor of the penthouse gleamed under the cold light of chandeliers, every surface polished until it reflected not warmth, but distance. Harrison Blackstone sat behind a glass desk overlooking the skyline, phone pressed against his palm like a second heartbeat. His mind was inside a negotiation worth millions. Yet the silence in the room was broken not by the deal but by a child's voice. Daddy, do you even like being with us? The words dropped into the space like a stone into still water, rippling through him, rattling every wall of control he had built. James, only 7, stood near the floor-to-ceiling window, with eyes that were not accusing, but heartbreakingly honest. The buzzing phone in Harrison's hand felt suddenly heavier than his empire. He forced a smile and answered, "Of course I do, James. Why would you ask that?" The boy's reply was soft but brutal. "Because you always look like you want to be somewhere else." The truth pierced him sharper than any lawsuit, sharper than any market loss. 3 years earlier, the same child had clung to his mother's skirt inside the vast corner office of Blackstone Industries. The walls of glass offered a view of the city sprawling beneath, but inside the air carried the suffocating weight of confrontation. Celeste, her dark skin glowing under the unforgiving lights, stood in front of the desk with their 4 children circling her like small satellites. Her green eyes, fierce and unyielding, locked on him. He had barely looked up from his computer screen when she entered, absorbed in the Kaufman acquisition that promised to cement his dominance in the tech market. "Celeste, can this wait? Millions ride on this deal." Her voice cut through the clatter of keystrokes. "No, Harrison, it can't wait. I'm done. We're leaving." He laughed, the sound echoing against the marble walls, a brittle shield of arrogance. "Leaving? What does that even mean? You can't just walk out. You have no money, no career, no way to support them." But she did not flinch. She reached down, steadying Isabella on her hip, as Emma clung to her hand. Oliver tugged her sleeve, and James tried to climb onto the desk, scattering papers across the polished surface. "I have everything I need," she said. "I have my children, and I refuse to let them grow up in a prison made of gold." The room grew colder, though the sun burned bright through the glass. Harrison stood, gesturing toward the vast symbols of wealth that surrounded them. Models of private jets, framed photographs from award ceremonies, charts of skyrocketing profits displayed on digital screens. "Look at what I've built. They will have everything. The best schools, the safest homes, every door open to them." His words carried the weight of logic, but Celeste's voice carried the weight of truth. "When was the last time you read to them, Harrison? When did you ever patch a scraped knee or cheer at a school play? You provide everything except the one thing they need most: a father." Her words cracked something in him, though he hid it behind clenched fists and a jaw locked tight. James had crawled onto the desk, scribbling with a pen across documents worth billions, and for once, Harrison could not bring himself to care. Celeste gathered the children as if bracing them for impact, her movements precise, her tone unwavering. "We're going home," she told them, voice steady. Emma looked confused. "But this is home, Mommy." Celeste knelt to meet her daughter's eyes. "No, baby, this is Daddy's office. Home is where people love each other more than they love their work." Harrison felt a surge of panic, the empire he had forged threatening to collapse in the one place he had never fortified: his family. "Celeste, you're not thinking clearly. You'll regret this. You'll come crawling back when reality hits." She stepped toward the door, the children in tow, her back straight with resolve. "If you ever choose them over your empire, you'll know where to find us." The slam of the door was louder than any bell on Wall Street, sealing his isolation. The memory returned to him now, 3 years later, with the sting of truth no empire could silence. That September morning had been the beginning of the fracture, but the wound had only widened. In the years since, the courtroom had echoed with evidence he could not fight. Teachers testifying about empty seats at recitals, videos of James waving into a void, Isabella's paintings where the father figure was missing or drawn smaller than everyone else. The judge had asked him one question. "Mr. Blackstone, when was the last time you had a meaningful conversation with your son?" His answer, wrapped in business jargon and scheduled visitation rights, had crumbled under the weight of silence. The gavel struck, custody awarded to Celeste, and Harrison walked out of the courtroom, stripped not of money, but of presence. Back in the penthouse, the boy's question still lingered, raw and unyielding. Harrison tried to steady his breathing, but his own son's gaze held him captive, demanding more than excuses, demanding more than wealth. For years he had told himself that provision equaled love, that deals signed were proof of devotion, but the simplicity of James's words destroyed the illusion. He had built an empire, yet failed the only audience that mattered. The child turned away from the window, his small shoulders heavy with disappointment far beyond his years, and Harrison felt the marble beneath his feet shift like sand. The chapter of denial had ended. The decision Celeste had made years earlier echoed now as prophecy, and he knew her words were carved into the truth he could no longer ignore. Presence is the only gift that matters. It was not just her belief, it was the truth staring at him through the eyes of his son. And for the first time, Harrison wondered if redemption was possible. Not through wealth, not through power, but through the terrifying, humbling act of being there. The house was small, crouched at the edge of a quiet street where the asphalt cracked under the weight of forgotten years. Its paint had faded to a dull beige, shutters hanging loose on rusty hinges, the front porch creaking when Celeste stepped onto it. She carried grocery bags heavy with discount labels, her arms trembling, her back burning from the double shift at the diner. Inside, the air smelled faintly of detergent and candle wax, an odd mixture of survival and dignity. The walls bore patches where paint peeled, but children's drawings covered the scars, bright crayons battling against gray plaster. Celeste dropped the bags on the counter, listening to the laughter spilling from the living room, a sound that filled the worn house more completely than any chandelier ever could. Her heart clenched with exhaustion, yet softened at the sight of James stacking books into a castle, Isabella scribbling across cheap paper, Oliver tossing a ball made of socks to Emma. They had nothing compared to the marble towers of their father's world, yet here they seemed lighter, freer, alive. Celeste rubbed her hands against her apron, staring at the fridge humming weakly in the corner. Its shelves held only milk, eggs, and the promise of another night of improvisation. The children rushed in, tugging at her waist, voices colliding in excitement. "Mom, can we have cake tomorrow? It's Emma's birthday." She smiled, hiding the weight of the question. The budget didn't stretch to cakes with icing and candles, but she refused to let that truth bruise their joy. That night, when they slept tangled together under mismatched blankets, she sat at the kitchen table with a dim bulb flickering overhead, flipping through coupons and calculating every cent. She found a single packet of muffin mix buried in the cupboard. It would have to be enough. In the morning, she lit one candle, placed it on top of the lone muffin, and set it in front of Emma. The little girl's eyes widened as if she had been given the world. Her siblings clapped and sang loudly, their voices shaky yet triumphant. Emma blew out the flame, cheeks flushed with delight, and Celeste caught the moment in her mind like a priceless photograph. But joy was fragile, and the outside world pressed against their fragile walls. At school, Oliver returned with his shirt wrinkled and shoes scuffed, his face lowered. She asked what happened, and his silence told her more than words. Finally, he whispered that other kids had mocked his hand-me-down sneakers, laughed at the faded soles. Celeste knelt, pressing his chin up until his eyes met hers. "They don't see what I see. You run faster than any of them because you carry heart, not shoes." He nodded, but she saw the doubt still flickering in his gaze, the ache of wanting to belong. She felt powerless for a moment, but then a fire sparked. She would teach them pride in what could not be purchased. That night, they played outside with fireflies blinking in the dark, Oliver racing barefoot across the grass, his laughter rising above the memory of ridicule. The nights were the hardest. Celeste dragged herself through the door long past midnight, her muscles screaming, her uniform carrying the scent of grease and coffee. Sometimes she collapsed on the couch without even taking off her shoes. Once she woke to find a blanket draped over her and a glass of warm milk on the table. Isabella stood nearby, shy and silent, the quiet caretaker of the family. The girls' drawings had changed. No longer empty houses and small figures, but vibrant scenes of them laughing together in the cramped kitchen. Celeste realized her daughter was recording resilience, sketching proof that they were more than their struggles. Tears burned behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She kissed Isabella's forehead, whispering gratitude that words could not hold. Even when fatigue pressed her down, Celeste created rituals to stitch hope into their days. On Fridays, she turned off the dim overhead light, lit 2 candles, and read aloud from a worn library book. The words rolled off her tongue, weaving magic into the cracked walls. The children huddled close, their breathing slowing, their bodies melting into hers. For those minutes, there were no unpaid bills, no whispers of wealth they had abandoned, no shadow of Harrison's empire looming over them. There was only the story, the sound of their mother's voice, and the safety of presence. In those nights, Celeste understood the paradox. They had less than ever before, yet something priceless had been restored. Still, moments of weakness crept in when she least expected. One evening, James asked why they couldn't go on trips like their classmates, why Daddy's house had rooms bigger than their whole place. The question was a blade, sharp with innocence. Celeste drew in a breath, steadying her voice. Daddy has money, but money doesn't always mean happiness. James frowned. But he says he works so we can have everything. She held him close, pressing his cheek against her chest, where her heartbeat thudded. The only thing you need is love, and I'll never let you go without it. He closed his eyes, and for a moment she felt his doubt ease. Yet when he drifted to sleep, Celeste stared at the ceiling, wondering if the cracks in their world would swallow their faith. Each day tested her resolve, each challenge daring her to falter. Yet she refused. She found work cleaning offices before dawn, waiting tables in the afternoon, and patching clothes late into the night. Her body weakened, but her spirit sharpened like steel under fire. Every sacrifice became a testament. Every smile from her children, proof that she was building something no empire could rival. She carried scars of exhaustion, yet in those scars lived strength. She understood now that true wealth was not locked behind marble walls, but grown in the soil of sacrifice, watered by persistence and lit by the fragile flames of love. The limousine slid into the narrow street like a shadow that didn't belong, its polished black surface reflecting houses worn down by years of storms and silence. Children from the neighborhood paused their games to watch, their eyes wide as the door opened and Harrison Blackstone stepped out in a suit too sharp for the cracked sidewalks. His presence filled the air like an intrusion, his polished shoes crunching against gravel as he carried boxes wrapped in metallic paper. Inside the modest home, Celeste stiffened the moment she saw him. Her children rushed forward, excited by the commotion, but she caught their wrists gently, her voice low yet firm. Let him speak, then decide. Harrison bent down, placing the boxes on the worn rug. I thought you might enjoy something special. The children tore at the ribbons with the impatience of innocence, but their faces shifted when the glitter faded into disappointment. James touched the sleek new tablet, then glanced at the stack of library books Celeste had brought home the night before. Can we still read tonight, Mom? He asked, setting the expensive device aside. The castle of books mattered more than the glow of screens. Harrison masked the sting with a forced smile, but his eyes betrayed the blow. He tried again the following week, this time with spectacles. A famous singer, flown in by private jet, stood in their yard with a microphone glittering under the afternoon sun. Neighbors gathered, stunned by the surreal sight of celebrity among patch fences and folding chairs. The children clapped politely, then wandered off toward the cardboard boxes stacked near the porch. Within minutes, they had built a crooked fortress, crawling inside, their giggles muffled by paper walls. The singer's voice soared over space, her audience slipping away into imagination, far richer than any performance money could buy. Celeste leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, eyes locked on Harrison. She didn't need words. The failure was etched into his face. Still, he refused to yield. The next gift was a gleaming bicycle, its chrome shining brighter than the afternoon sun, its wheels still smelling of factory rubber. Oliver approached, hand trailing along the handlebars, but instead of mounting the prize, he wheeled out the dented, second-hand bike Celeste had repaired. Its chain rattled, its paint flaked, but it carried the weight of memory and care. "I like this one better," he said quietly, pedaling down the street with determination. Harrison stood frozen, the new bike abandoned like a monument to misunderstanding. Isabella sketched the moment later that night, her brother racing free on the old frame while a shining machine sat untouched. Celeste taped the drawing to the fridge, a quiet reminder that presence could not be replaced by possession. The breaking point came on a stormy evening when thunder rolled low and heavy across the sky. James complained of feeling hot, his small body trembling under the covers. Celeste pressed her palm to his forehead and felt the burn of fever spreading fast. Before she could fetch water, Harrison burst in, panic already sharpening his voice. "We need a hospital. I'll call specialists, the best in the state." His phone was in his hand before she could answer, his thumb scrolling frantically, summoning a storm of urgency. Celeste caught his wrist, her voice calm but edged with command. "He needs comfort, not chaos." Harrison pulled free, dialing anyway, barking orders into the receiver. Within an hour, headlights flooded the street, sleek cars delivering doctors in tailored coats, nurses carrying sleek cases, instruments gleaming. The living room shrank under their presence, the small house stuffed with too much authority. James whimpered at the sight of strangers hovering, machines clicking, voices layering instructions. The boy's chest rose in uneven gasps, fear amplifying his sickness. Celeste pushed through the cluster, scooping her son into her arms, her voice steady even as her own pulse raced. She carried him past the polished stethoscopes and sterile hands, settling into the corner chair worn by years of use. She opened a battered copy of Where the Wild Things Are, its cover frayed, pages softened by countless reads. Her voice flowed low and rhythmic, each word wrapping around James like a blanket warmer than any machine. His breathing slowed, his forehead damp but easing, his small hand clutching the fabric of her blouse. Harrison stood at the edge of the room, the phone still glowing in his hand. The world's best experts silenced by the sight of a mother's lullaby, healing what medicine could not. The storm outside cracked open the sky, lightning flashing across his face as realization carved itself into him. Money could assemble armies of professionals, but it could not summon trust. It could not conjure peace. It could not replace her presence. James's fever broke before dawn, the sweat cooling on his temples as he drifted into steady sleep. The doctors packed their equipment, subdued, leaving quietly, their expensive services unused. Celeste kissed her son's damp hair, exhaustion softening her features, but triumph glinting in her eyes. Harrison hovered near the doorway, his silence louder than thunder. He had stood helpless in the empire of experts, stripped of authority by the simplest of truths. Celeste did not look at him as she whispered to James, but her words were meant for them both. "Love isn't measured in what you buy, it's measured in what you give of yourself." Harrison's grip on the phone slackened, his chest tight with shame. He had never felt smaller, never felt so powerless in the home he once dismissed. When morning light poured through thin curtains, James stirred, blinking up at his father who still lingered. "Daddy, I'm better," he murmured, then closed his eyes again. Harrison's throat burned with the weight of an apology he could not form. He looked around the room, the peeling paint, the cheap furniture, the drawings taped to the fridge, and for the first time, he saw not poverty, but proof. Proof that in this fragile house, his children were loved without condition. He stepped outside as the rain ended, the street washed clean, his shoes splashing through shallow puddles. Behind him, laughter rose faintly as the other children woke, voices filling the house with warmth he could never replicate with money. He realized then that every grand gesture had failed because It was never the gesture they wanted. They wanted him, stripped of armor, willing to sit in the silence and simply be. The morning air carried the faint chill of early spring, damp earth mixing with the scent of cut grass on a small baseball field, lined with crooked chalk. Metal bleachers creaked under the weight of parents, clutching paper cups of coffee, their voices weaving into a hum of cheers. Among them sat a man who looked strangely out of place, though for the first time to me, he did not feel untouchable. Harrison Blackstone wore jeans and a plain gray shirt, his hair slightly disheveled, the absence of his tailored suit leaving him exposed yet free. He gripped the cold rail, his phone buzzing inside his pocket, but he forced himself not to reach for it. The vibration gnawed at him, each pulse a reminder of meetings delayed and deals unraveling. Yet he kept his gaze fixed on the field where Oliver stood, with a bat too heavy for his arms, but determination burning in his eyes. Celeste sat a few rows above, her arms wrapped around Isabella and Emma, their faces glowing in the pale sunlight. She watched Harrison carefully, skepticism shadowing her gaze, as if waiting to see if this moment would fracture like all the others. But something in his posture was different. His shoulders were not squared with arrogance, but lowered in surrender, his body leaning forward, every nerve taut with anticipation, not for business, but for his son. The crowd erupted as the pitcher wound up, the ball slicing through the air. Oliver swung, the crack echoing sharply against the metal bat, and the ball shot into the outfield. Harrison surged to his feet, shouting words he hadn't planned, his voice cracking. "Run, Oliver, run!" His palms stung from clapping, his throat burned from cheering, but he didn't stop. He felt the joy surge through him like electricity, raw and unfamiliar. Oliver slid into base, dust rising in a golden cloud around him, and when the umpire's arms stretched wide, declaring him safe, the bleachers thundered. Oliver glanced to the stands, his eyes searching until they found his father. Harrison's chest clenched when the boy's face broke into a smile so pure it stripped years of distance in an instant. He lifted his hand high, waving frantically, his voice carrying above the cheers. "Dad, you saw me this time." Harrison swallowed hard, the words searing into him, and he nodded, shouting back, "I saw everything." For the first time, he had not left early, had not missed the play, had not disappeared into a call. He had been there, fully, completely, undeniably. The game stretched on, each inning a lesson in patience. Harrison remained in his seat, resisting the itch of the phone vibrating against his thigh. At one point, he pulled it out, the screen glowing with urgent notifications, numbers flashing like alarms. He stared at it, his pulse quickening, his instincts screaming to respond. Then he pressed the side button, the screen going black, the device slipping back into his pocket. The silence that followed was deafening yet liberating. He exhaled, shoulders loosening, eyes locked again on his children. The deal could collapse, the empire could wobble, but none of it mattered as much as the dust-streaked face of his son scanning the stands for him. After the game, the children spilled onto the field, running in chaotic circles. Celeste moved slowly, holding James's hand, his fever still fresh in her memory, though now replaced with renewed energy. Harrison approached cautiously, uncertain if his presence would be welcome. Oliver reached him first, gripping his arm with hands still dusty from the diamond. "Can you come next time too?" he asked, voice trembling with hope. Harrison crouched, meeting his son's eyes, his voice unsteady but firm. "If you want me here, I'll be here every time." The boy nodded, pulling him into a hug before darting off to join his siblings. Harrison remained on the grass, stunned by the simplicity of it, the unearned forgiveness of children who had every reason to resent him. Celeste stepped closer, her expression unreadable. "One game doesn't fix everything." Her tone was sharp but not cruel, her eyes watching him with both doubt and reluctant respect. Harrison nodded, accepting the weight of her words. "I know. I can't buy their trust. I can only show up." She studied him for a moment longer, then glanced at the children building pyramids of gloves and hats near the dugout. "They'll believe it when they see it," she said quietly. He followed her gaze, his own heart tightening at the sight of them. He had spent years thinking they wanted the world, but all they wanted was him. As the sun began to sink, The family gathered near Celeste's car. The children tugged at her sleeves, asking for hot dogs from the concession stand, chattering about the game. Harrison lingered by the open trunk, awkward in the ordinary rhythm of departure. James tugged his sleeve, his voice soft but steady. "Daddy, you don't need to buy us anything. Just don't leave again." The words landed like a verdict, heavier than any court ruling, binding him not through law, but through love. Harrison bent down, his eyes wet, and whispered, "I won't." The boy nodded, satisfied, and ran to join his sisters. Celeste closed the trunk, glancing at Harrison one final time. For once, there was no bitterness in her eyes, only the faint trace of possibility. That night, the house glowed, not with chandeliers, but with the flicker of a single candle on muffin. The children gathered around the kitchen table, singing loudly, their voices rising above the hum of the old refrigerator. Harrison sat among them, his tie absent, his phone hidden, his hands steady. Celeste placed the muffin in the center, its flame small but unwavering. Together they leaned in, the children squeezing their eyes shut, making wishes that needed no words. Harrison blew out the candle with them, his chest tight, his heart lighter than it had been in years. In the silence that followed, Celeste's voice carried like a vow. Presence is the only gift that matters. And this time, Harrison understood not as an outsider, but as part of the circle, as a father who had finally chosen to be there. Thank you for staying with us through this powerful journey. What part of the story resonated most with you? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you found meaning here, consider subscribing so you don't miss the next story, and let us know where in the world you're watching from. Your support means everything. Until next time, remember, the greatest gift you can ever give is simply being there. See you soon.